You're sitting in the mud outside Da Nang, cleaning your M14. The trigger assembly won't click back in. The wooden stock has swollen from 3 days of rain, physically grown 1/8 of an inch. You try forcing it. Nothing. Yesterday, it was shooting 6 inches left. This morning, a guy in 2nd platoon had his rifle cook off. Barrels so hot, a round just ignited in the chamber and fired itself. The guy next to you has the new M16, 6 pounds, 120 rounds on him. You've got 11 pounds of rifle and 20 rounds of ammo. You just heard a twig snap 30 meters out in the tree line. It's 1965, and the United States Army handed you a rifle built for a war that never happened.
The M14 exists because the Ordnance Corps spent 10 years solving a problem that didn't need solving. After World War II, the Army looked at their arsenal: the M1 Garand, the M1 carbine, the BAR, the M3 submachine gun, 4 rifles, 4 ammunition types, 4 supply chains. So they decided to build one universal weapon, the last battle rifle America would ever need. They ignored every warning sign for a decade. The competition came down to 2 rifles, the Belgian FN FAL and the T-44, basically a modified Garand with a detachable magazine and full auto. The FN FAL was lighter, more reliable, and used by nearly every NATO country that wasn't America. But the T-44 could supposedly be built on existing Garand tooling, which would save money. That was a lie. The M14 needed entirely different machining. But by the time the Ordnance Corps figured that out, they'd already committed to buying 1.3 million rifles. May 1957, the T-44 becomes the M14. United States rifle, caliber 7.62 millimeter. Production started in 1959. Early batch testing from Harrington and Richardson and Winchester. Quality control was a disaster. Reports showed 90% had loose gas cylinders. Some had flash suppressors installed so badly that they contacted the bullets. One rifle had excessive headspace so severe it was deemed unsafe to fire. During proof firing, some receivers cracked or failed. The manufacturing standards weren't being met. The Army kept producing them. The alternative, admitting the program was flawed, was unthinkable. The M14 weighed 8.7 pounds empty. The loaded 20-round magazine brought it to 11 pounds. The 7.62 NATO cartridge delivered 2,600 foot-pounds of energy and could punch through a steel plate at 100 yards. On a range in Georgia, that's incredible. In the jungle, it's the wrong tool. 1965, the United States sends combat troops to Vietnam. They're carrying M14s. August 1965. Operation Starlite. First major American offensive of the war. Marines hit the beach on the Van Tuong Peninsula with M14s, facing the 1st Viet Cong Regiment in brutal close-quarters fighting through rice paddies and villages. After-action reports come back with the same complaint. Too long, too heavy. 44 inches overall length, nearly 4 feet of rifle. In a Huey helicopter, you're smacking it into every surface trying to get in and out. In a thick jungle where you're pushing through vegetation so dense you can't see 10 feet ahead, that length catches on everything. Engagement ranges in Vietnam averaged between 10 and 30 meters, according to S.L. Marshall's combat studies. The M14 was designed to hit targets at 460 meters. You're fighting a close-range guerrilla war with a long-range precision rifle. And the weight problem isn't just the rifle. A basic combat load, 100 rounds, 5 20-round magazines, 7 pounds of 7.62 ammo. Rifles 11. You're at 18 pounds before water, grenades, your ruck, the radio if you're unlucky enough to be RTO. Guys with M16s, 100 rounds of 5.56 weighed 3.5 pounds. They could carry 200 rounds, 300 rounds for the same weight. In a firefight, volume of fire keeps you alive. The M14 had a selector switch, semi-auto and full auto. Full auto was useless. The recoil from 7.62 NATO was so violent that after 2 or 3 rounds, the muzzle would climb straight up. Soldiers called it the anti-aircraft gun. You'd flip to full auto, squeeze the trigger, watch your rounds stitch from the target into the sky. The Army started installing selector locks on 90% of M14s, physically preventing full auto. They neutered their own rifle. The M14A1 was supposed to fix this. Pistol grip, forward vertical grip, muzzle stabilizer, bipod. Looked like a light machine gun. Still had a 20-round magazine and a barrel that overheated after sustained fire. The BAR from World War II had the exact same problems. They didn't learn.
Vietnam is a swamp. The M14 was made of wood. You see the problem. The stock was walnut or birch. Beautiful, looks great in a parade. In Vietnam's humidity, that wood absorbed moisture like a sponge and swelled. When it swelled, it applied uneven pressure to the barrel and receiver, physically bending them. Your rifle's zero would shift. You'd aim center mass and hit 6 inches left, a foot high, depending on how wet your stock was that day. After-action reports noted soldiers disassembling rifles to clean them in the field and being unable to reassemble them because the wood had expanded so much the parts wouldn't fit. One Marine wrote, "The rifle was accurate when it was dry and clean, but we were never dry and clean." They introduced a fiberglass stock in 1964, synthetic material that didn't absorb water. Problem solved, right? They didn't issue them to Vietnam in meaningful numbers. Most troops carried wood-stocked versions through 1966 and 1967. By the time fiberglass stocks arrived, the M14 was already being phased out. The receiver, bolt carrier, operating rod, all steel. Vietnam's humidity rusted them heavily. You had to oil them constantly. But too much oil attracted dirt and vegetation that gummed up the action. You were stuck between rust and fouling. Grunts stopped trusting the rifle. When your rifle doesn't work, you die. The M14 worked great in garrison, worked great on the range. In Vietnam, where it mattered, it failed. The Viet Cong and NVA carried AK-47s, 34 inches long, 7.5 pounds, chambered in 7.62 by 39 millimeter, an intermediate cartridge easier to control, let them carry more ammo. The AK had loose tolerances. You could pack it with mud, dunk it in a river, and it would fire. It wasn't accurate past 300 meters. They weren't shooting past 300 meters. They were shooting at 30.
By late 1966, officers were filing reports about soldiers carrying AKs, not as trophies, as primary weapons. They'd dump their M14s at base camp and hump captured enemy rifles into the bush because they trusted a rifle built in a Soviet factory more than the one built in Springfield Armory, Massachusetts. That's not a logistics problem. That's a catastrophe. November 1965. The 1st Cavalry Division goes into the Battle of Ia Drang with the new M16. The fighting at Landing Zone X-Ray proves the lightweight, high-capacity M16 is the future. The after-action analysis is clear. Volume of fire at close range wins fights in Vietnam. The M14 is done. The Ordnance Corps won't admit it. In 1967, Congressman Richard Icord convened a special subcommittee to investigate the M16 rifle program. Early M16s are jamming. Soldiers are dying with dead rifles in their hands. The hearings expose something darker. The delays in adopting the M16 weren't about testing. They were about ego. The ordnance establishment, the old guard who designed the M14, viewed the M16 as a toy. The 5.56 millimeter cartridge was inadequate for real soldiers. The lightweight rifle was plastic garbage. They called it the Mattel toy because of the polymer furniture. So even as evidence piled up that the M14 was wrong for Vietnam, they stalled. While they stalled, men carried 11-pound rifles into fights where they needed 6-pound rifles. Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara finally forced the issue. He bypassed the Ordnance Corps entirely and ordered the M16 into production as a one-time procurement. That one-time order became the standard for every branch. The I-Court hearings revealed the Army had known the M14 was inferior since the 1962 Hitch Report, a Department of Defense study that found the AR-15 was superior in lethality, hit probability, and overall effectiveness. They'd known for 3 years, kept issuing M14s anyway. The General Accounting Office noted the Army's insistence on the M14 created a rifle deficit during the 1965 buildup. There weren't enough rifles for the troops being deployed. They were short thousands of weapons because they'd bet everything on a rifle that didn't work. We don't have casualty figures for soldiers killed because they had an M14 instead of an M16. The military doesn't track it that way. But we know this: engagement in Vietnam was close. Ammunition weight mattered. Rifle length mattered. Controllable firepower mattered. The M14 failed on all 4 counts. How many firefights were lost because a squad couldn't carry enough ammo? How many ambushes went bad because a rifle 0 had shifted from stock swelling? How many times did a soldier's rifle climb off target during full auto when controlled fire would have saved his life? The Army doesn't have a checkbox for died because his rifle jammed from humidity. They don't track killed because he ran out of ammo while the guy next to him with an M16 was still shooting. Between 1965 and 1967, the peak years of M14 use in Vietnam, over 19,000 Americans died in combat. Not all infantry, not all in firefights, but thousands were. And some of those thousands died with 11 pounds of beautifully machined, Ordnance Corps-approved failure in their hands in jungle fights they might have won with a different rifle. We'll never know how many, but the number isn't 0. By 1968, the M14 is gone from frontline infantry units. The M16A1 replaced it. Shortest-serving standard rifle in U.S. military history. The story doesn't end there. While the M14 failed as a battle rifle, it succeeded as something else. February 1967, the Army started converting national match-grade M14s into sniper rifles. Glass-bedded actions, adjustable ranging telescopes, match-grade ammunition. Designated the XM21. Army snipers used them to devastating effect. The semi-automatic capability let them engage multiple targets faster than bolt-action rifles. The 7.62 NATO round, too powerful for close combat, was perfect at 600 meters. The accuracy that made the M14 fragile as a field rifle made it exceptional as a precision instrument. The XM21 became the M21, served as the Army's primary sniper rifle until 1988, 21 years. Today, updated versions, the Mk14 Enhanced Battle Rifle, are in service in Afghanistan and Iraq as designated marksman rifles. Modern chassis systems solved the wood stock warping. Synthetic materials fixed the environmental failures. The rifle finally found the role it should have had from the start: precision fire support, not general issue. But that doesn't change what happened between 65 and 68. The M14 was designed by committee, built on tradition, forced into service despite evidence it was wrong for the war being fought. The soldiers who carried it didn't fail. The rifle didn't fail because it was poorly made. It was beautifully engineered. It failed because the men who ordered it into production valued doctrine over data, pride over pragmatism, and the legacy of the Garand over the lives of the troops using it. One veteran put it this way: "The M14 was a great rifle for a war we never fought. Vietnam wasn't that war."